Now I want to turn over to David Salmanoff. David, you had invited a guest to talk to us about an interesting idea. You might be muted. You are.
All right, so I'm here with Josephine Dorado, and is Josephine, can
you hear us? Okay, great, thank you.
Good, okay. All right, so Josephine has developed a online game for social and political activism, and I'm now working with her to adapt it specifically to internet activism and internet governance. But first, I'd like to have her give the quick overview of the basic application, and then we'll discuss how that would be adapted to the internet. Okay?
Hi, everyone. So I just put a URL into the group chat over to the right. It's bit.ly/reACTor-Prezi. So you can just have that Prezi for your reference, and I'll go ahead and talk around it as well. And basically, reACTor is something that we presented as part of the TEDx Fulbright conference just a couple of weeks ago, and it is an initiative to re-envision news and activism by combining them in a mobile game that encourages activism around news stories that people care about. So if you go to the Prezi, and let me know if anyone can't see it.
I'm sharing it now, so if anybody wants to see it on this Hangout, they can click on mine.
Oh, great. Okay, so I'll just say forward and back then. Okay, so if you go forward to the click on the forward button to the right. It might be a little bit, might have to hover. Yeah, there you go. So basically, the idea is that there are a lot of online activist efforts, and there have been some great, initiatives like the SOPA effort and the Japan earthquake relief effort, and next. And in particular, the Japan earthquake relief effort really was an interesting combination of virtual goods leading to real-world relief, such that Farmville was very much a part of it. So basically, 24 hours after the earthquake happened, the Zynga, the makers of Farmville, created a daikon, a little virtual plant that you could plant in your Farmville, and within 5 days, the players raised just over $1.5 million, which is kind of amazing. Next. So all of these efforts were possible within this kind of time frame and scale only because of the internet. And next. But the problem is that, and you can go ahead and click next. The problem is that all of these efforts are a bit fractured. Next. You have, for example, 6 different hashtags during the, or maybe even more, during the Philippines, relief effort. Next. A myriad of efforts, lots of activity, and sort of different foci and different stakeholders around it. Next. And what this actually adds up to is that people do want to help, but they don't always know where to go and how to go about it. Next. And next. So there's currently no overarching structure that represents and is the umbrella for internet activism. Next. So what we're proposing is that reACTor will close the gap, next, because it's a mobile game that encourages activism around news stories, next. You'll be able to see what's going on around and what you can do about it. So applying it to the news story of the Japanese tsunami again, next, you'll see on the left, and this is just a mock-up, but it'll give you the general idea. But for example, the Japanese nuclear crisis grows more dire, news item, next. And on the other side are to take around it, such as Convoy of Hope Disaster Relief Fund, or making disaster relief kits, or volunteering with Ushahidi, next. But basically, it's linking news to actions in a real-world effort, next. But the thing that sort of sets it apart is that's within a game framework. So for example, in this mock-up, you see that the users challenged me to a reACTor match. She volunteered at the Convoy of Hope and got 100 points for it and wants me to match that or beat it. Next. Next. And next. So when you put all of it together, it's just that the news becomes the real-world news, becomes the inspiration, and combining that with inspiration inside a game framework gives you a new way to engage with news and activism. Next. And then just a little bit of background about some stats on mobile news and mobile gaming. Next. Within mobile news, the current Facebook news feed is considered a personal newspaper for a lot of people, and users are actually consuming more news these days on their mobiles next. And there's some whopping statistics around Apple and Google Play stores in that 80% of the revenue in September 2013 was from games, and half of all app downloads were games. Next. And next. So just a little bit about the foundation. Next. I and a couple of colleagues got a MacArthur Foundation grant to realize, at the time we called it reACTor, which was a website that aggregated news and matched it up with social actions. At the time we didn't have the infrastructure to make it a mobile game, but now is the time that, now is basically the time that we're trying to do that, but there's already a little bit of experience with the process cycle and what worked and what didn't work in that project. Next. And next. So over half of the, I'm sure you guys already know some of these stats, that half of the population in the US owns a smartphone, 1 in 5 have globally, and then 1 in 17 own tablets. But the interesting thing about it next is that the most read item in the New York Times last year was not an article, it was the dialect quiz that some of you might be familiar with. Next. But basically, this dialect quiz became the most popular, most read item in 3 days. Next. Next. So basically, news outlets are looking for ways to engage with the public, and they spent, New York Times spent $70 million in advertising last year, and the BBC spent about $68.7 million in advertising. The way that we're looking at it is that reACTor is going to be not that much to make, and it's going to be a continuous way to connect real-world news and actions. Next. And next. So just a bit about our board. We have Samantha Berry, who's a social media producer at BBC, Adam Ellick, who's a New York Times journalist. He was actually the journalist that broke the story on Malala. Somebody from the biz dev department at Al Jazeera. So we have all some major media outlets involved as board of advisors, as well as the U.S. Institute for Peace, hopefully the Internet Society, and half of our board are all Fulbrighters as well. So we have the tremendous network globally of Fulbright as well. And that's it.
So the issue here is to adapt this specifically to issues of Internet activism and Internet governance. And we're now working on a proposal for the governance lab at New York University. Last year they did work with ICANN and developed a group of 16 draft proposals working with ICANN to improve multi-stakeholder innovation and involvement. And the most interesting one is proposal number 12, enhance learning by encouraging games. And the idea there was, to quote, ICANN must take seriously its commitment to engage its global stakeholder base in decision making, especially those who are ultimately impacted by those decisions. However, this does not mean that the practices by which ICANN governs must be humorless. So rather, ICANN could make the complexities of Internet governance and ICANN's work accessible and interesting to people with games and activities aimed at the next generation. So the idea would be to develop enhance reACTor to be specifically focused on Internet governance and Internet activism, include links to educational materials that the Internet Society is developing, currently already has developed. Also hearkening back to the scenarios that the Internet Society developed a couple of years back, the 4 different kinds of scenarios. In one case where it remains open, and and other cases where there are more censorship and lockdown proprietary technologies, etc. So work in those kinds of scenarios, and then plugging in the vast database of educational materials that ISOC already has, and leave that to real-world actions, perhaps using PopVox, which Paul had arranged for a demo a few years back. They're expanding a lot, and interestingly, what they've just done, I just got an email today from them, is PopVox facilitates people getting in touch with their legislators at the federal level, but They've also expanded now, and this is more relevant even to the internet activism, they've just expanded that to facilitate contacting regulators and regulatory agencies. So perhaps you could have a scenario looking at different relating to net neutrality, different kinds of ways that would, the directions, policy directions that could go, and then you can immediately, send Tom Wheeler an email because you'd have all the contact information there. And from the gamification standpoint, you could assign points, badges, or prizes to people who do more or more. You would get a few points for sending an email, or perhaps showing up at his office and talking to him would earn you more points or prizes. Yeah. So that's basically the concept there.
Yeah, you get a points multiplier, so to speak.
Yeah. For doing something that's more difficult or demanding. Yeah.
That sounds really cool. I know Wheeler would be getting a lot of calls and a lot of visits right now, that's for sure. If you all haven't seen the recent news about the FCC's actions on net neutrality, you should definitely spend some time reading about that. Thanks for the presentation, David, Josephine. That was very interesting. I see you're working with Jeremy Pesner. He's one of our active DC chapter members, so that's wonderful too. Well, great. So I think that we're going to be on the lookout for ways that we can help you as well. And David, just keep me in the loop. I know you're already talking to others at ISAC headquarters, so please keep that up. I mean, I really am impressed with the presentation. It's very good stuff. Any questions from anyone? I see Glenn has a hand up.
Wonderful stuff. I'm a mobile fan. I've done a lot of mobile for Android and iPhone and my tablet. So this is exciting stuff. It's a shame that somebody wasn't waving your flag in Brazil. It would have been a nice thing to see. I just need the links to download it to test it on my iPad and Android phone. So if I could have that, that'd be great.
Okay. For now, we just have the presentation and the pitch video. We're in development as we speak. What we did have in development before that was a result of the MacArthur Foundation Award was the website matching engine. So that actually was our prototype, but we're actually not going to be using, we're going to be starting fresh with the code so that it's all sort of native to the mobile experience.
Yeah, if you need a tester, I'll be happy to volunteer on that.
We will.
And is a good tester. I'll assert to that. He's good with mobile. All right, great.